Welcome to, I think, number 24 of the exposition through the work, The Way of God, by Rabbi Mordechai Goodman with Site or Kesher in collaboration with Jewish Education in Manchester. We're about to carry on in our extravaganza through this work, which is the quintessential handbook of Jewish thought, philosophy, outlook. And that's like an encyclopedic kind of reference work. Go jump back to number 1 if you want an intro as to what all this is. And what we're going to do today is discuss the unique power of learning Torah, why it's so prized by Orthodox Jews, and how it can actually help you develop a better Jewish life and a better relationship with Hashem. That's what we're doing today. So when you're ready, let's get our books open to page 71 if you've got one. If you don't have a book, maybe on your online resource, get to section 1, chapter 4.9. In the book is page 71. If you don't have a book, you don't have a text, just follow along audibly, and we'll carry on now. We're about to do the unique power of Torah learning. God granted us one particular means which can bring man close to God more than anything else, and this is the study of his revealed Torah. The revealed Torah. Torah, Nevi'im and Kesuvim, the 24 books of the Bible. That's the 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch. The Nevi'im, the books of prophets. And the writings, which are things like Tehillim, Psalms, and the Megillahs and things like that. You should know that if you're reading this in a book, you could make a note here, see page 255.1. Make a cross-reference because we're going to discuss this at great length on page 255.1, which is in section 4. So we're going to do this more later on, but he's going to introduce this idea now. Such study of the written, revealed Torah accomplishes this in 2 separate ways, and this is really important, only of the written Torah now. Number 1, through merely reading it, and number 2, through its comprehension. Which means merely reading elements of the written, revealed Torah have a component of power and influx, which will affect you merely by reciting them, as long as they're not recited in folly, disgust, in hatred, or something. Just like you would want to learn French or economics or engineering, you approach it with the same intellectual honesty as any other area of study. It will work. You get a lot more out of it the more you comprehend it, because it enters your psyche more. But it has intrinsic sanctifying power in and of itself. This is only true of the written law. You will get no such benefit of the recitation of Mishnah, which is oral law, or Gemara, which are the minutes of the discussion that were recorded about the Mishnah in Babylonia and Jerusalem, and Tiberia, which is the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. If you just sit there reading those words over and over again, you don't know what they mean, they'll do nothing for you. But if you say Psalms to Tehillim and you don't know what it means, it does something for you. That's what we're getting out from this. There's something about the letter order of the actual works of the Bible, the written bits, which has a higher order than anything that's been encoded or written down about the oral tradition, such as the Mishnah. In his love, God composed a volume of words decreed by his wisdom to be bestowed upon us. There's a certain string of letters which he wants us to have as a work of literature. This is the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, from Genesis through to Deuteronomy, and the latter works of the prophets, making up the 24 books of the Bible as we know it, what we would call a Tanakh, which is an acronym, Sof, Nun, Chof. Torah, Nun is Nevi'im, and Chof is Kesuvim, Tanakh. So one book, if you go into a Jewish bookshop and say, please can I purchase a Tanakh with English translation, they'll give you one book, usually, or could be a set of volumes, with all 24 books of the Bible in it. Yeah, that's everything, right? From Genesis all the way through to everything written. These words have the unique property of causing one who reads them to incorporate in themselves the highest excellence and greatest perfection, but the only condition is they be read with kedusha, with sanctity and purity, with the proper intent of fulfilling God's will. We'll talk about what happens if you don't do it like that on page 255, which is where this goes more in depth in section 4. Similarly, when one strives to understand these works, either through his own intellect, you're just reading the thinking, what does this mean? Why did it say it like that? Isn't that an unusual grammar? Why are they utilizing the male or female gender? You would have thought the other way around. Or why did they put the list the way they did? And then like a generality or generality followed by a list, and you start just trying to piece it together yourself. It boosts the benefit that it gives. Or if you decide to learn it with the explanations provided in commentaries, then you can get greater perfection according to your effort. The more you toil in trying to understand the text perfectly, the better an outcome it's going to be for you, A, reward-wise, in sheer reward, and 2 is in the effect of your psyche and consciousness and development that you're making. This is even more true, says the Ramchal, when one attains a grasp of the secrets and mysteries contained in these works, since each of these concepts that one understands fixes and integrates a certain degree of the highest levels of excellence and perfection in the soul and mind of the person who's reading them. That's how this actually works. Through all these acts, you not only earn excellence and perfection for yourself, but you elevate and perfect the entire fabric of creation. This is particularly true in the case of the study of the Torah. I've got to do the motherboard analogy with you. Let's say you have a circuit board. I don't know if you've seen inside a piece of electronics, be it an MP3 player, a computer, a camera. These days, it's in everything, like kettles, coffee machines. They're often microprocessor controlled, which means they've got a little circuit board with stuff on it, yeah? They're often green, and they're green like hard bits of plastic and a lacquered plastic. Then there's components that have been stuffed on that board, resistors, capacitors, solenoids, whatever it's going to be. Memory cards, processor units, memory slots, the plastic slots, USB ports, whatever it's going to be, is all on a circuit board. Each one of those components on that circuit board, be it a solenoid or a resistor or a power unit, are all given place, function, and purpose based upon the circuit that's been designed for them. So someone had to think up that circuit board, where the traces, which are like flat wires, would go, and say, right, based upon that, I'm going to need a capacitor there, a resistor there, a light bulb there, a battery there, and other bits and bobs there. And then I'll be able to do things, I don't know, like send an email or something with it. But I've got to think it through, right? I've got to have an idea what the circuit's going to be before I make it. Do you not agree? Yeah. The components on the board are like mitzvahs. Each component in the Torah is a mitzvah. Matzah, tzedakah, charity, Shabbos, tefillin, whatever it's going to be. They're only given place, function, and purpose because the Torah says at that particular time, such and such a person should do this in such and such a way. If a baby boy is a firstborn boy of a woman that's not had a cesarean section, and it's her first child, and she's not the daughter of a Levite, and she's not the daughter of a Cohen, of a priest, then you have to do Pidyon Haben, you have to redeem the firstborn. So of a male child at that particular time, in that way, then you have that mitzvah. And if you don't, then you don't. That mitzvah is given place, function, and purpose, and time, and all the variables because the Torah says so. The Torah is the circuitry. The Torah is the motherboard. The Torah is the archetypal design that gives place, function, and purpose to all the components that are set upon it. That's why when you learn Torah, you get the ultimate reward because you're learning the circuitry itself, not just the components. If you learn one mitzvah, let's say you know Pesach very, very, very well, Passover, the laws, how you make matzah, when you should make kiddush, how you should do a seder, the laws of what happens if you find bread in your house over Passover, you got it down. You're really clear with it. You know that component, that capacitor, very, very well. But if you learn the motherboard, if you learn the circuit board, if you learn the archetypal wiring that capacitor is soldered into, then you're attaching yourself to the entire framework. You understand the entire gamut. That's why Torah learning is so greatly prized in Judaism. Torah learning is like learning the circuitry of everything. I know right there you should have Pesach. I know right there should be Shabbos. I know right there should be not wearing a mixture of linen and wool threads called shatnez. You can't do that. Why? I see how it fits. If you only look at one individual mitzvah and master that alone, you'll understand that one component, that one particular resistor or chip, whatever it is that you've got on that motherboard. But you're not going to understand why it's there in relation to all the other components. But if you understand how the electricity flows across the circuitry and why it's got to be resisted and capacited there, because it's got to fall into some other unit there, then you realise, of course it's like that. You get everything. It's a more global idea. Because of the global nature of Torah, the more you learn about it, the more of the entire fabric of creation you're elevating, because the entire creation was made out of what... It says God looked into the Torah, used it as a blueprint, and then built the world out of it. Which means the Torah predates creation. The first thing he made was the Torah. And they said, right, now I've got the prints, now I've got the blueprints, the plans, the architectural plans. Let's get busy making matter. Planck's constant, weak and strong electromagnetic forces. I'm going to put in the spectrum of colours. I'm going to put in gravity, photons, Higgs boson particles, whatever it's going to be, condensate, condensate, everything. I'll put it all in there. There's only because the Torah says it. That's what I'm following the circuitry plans. If you go back and learn the circuitry plans, you get everything out of it. It's very intense. A running theme through this sefer. A new point. We're going to say over and over and over again. We're going to say we said it on page 41. We're going to say on page 175. We're going to say on page 85. We're going to say on page 275. Say it again and again and again. How do you define good? Something which is in line with God consciousness at that particular point in time for that particular thing. I've been saying this. Bread isn't good or bad. Okay? Bread is good for Shabbos, bad for Pesach, bad for Passover. There's nothing wrong or right with bread. It's just that it depends how you use it and when. What is good is the utilization of that thing good at that particular time or not? If something is good, it means that it is getting you closer to God consciousness at that time in that way if you utilize it that way. If something is bad, like eating bread on Passover, then it's really bad because it's shifting you away from God consciousness being utilized in that time and in that way, right? That's what we're saying. Anything which is good brings more God consciousness in to the system. Anything which is bad pushes God consciousness out of the system. That's how we define good and evil. Closeness to or distance from the Creator's presence. That's it. That's how you define things. If you've done a very good act, it means it's got you close to Hashem's consciousness in a very big way. A little good is a little baby, like a baby mitzvah, like a small good act. That's brought you close in a small way. And a Aveira, on the other hand, a sin on the other hand, big sin, has pushed you away from God consciousness greatly. A little sin has brought you away from God consciousness commensurately less. All right? Every state in which an individual exists, whether it be one of darkness or enlightenment, is only as a result of either the presence or absence of God's illumination. How close you are to his consciousness, to what he would want in any given situation. When anything is illuminated by God's presence, its purity and perfection are increased according to the degree of this illumination. Which means God's preset certain mitzvahs. If you remember from last time, if you were here last time, he's preset into certain mitzvahs, whatever they are, a certain amount of God consciousness that it will give you if you comply with its directives in the way that he's prescribed. It's not you that fixes things up. It's you that does the mitzvah, and then God's presence that's pulled into the system as a result of that mitzvah being done is what fixes things up. He's kind and gives you the payment as if you did the fixing. It's not people who work in nuclear power plants that make electricity. They press the right button at the right time to put the uranium rods in the water, to make steam, to turn turbines, to turn magnets, to make electricity. Now when there's making electricity, magnets moving about other magnets magically generates electricity out of thin air. Nobody knows how or why, but that's how we all use electricity. It's all from magnets. We just need to move something around another magnet enough to generate a charge. How should we do that? Let's build a dam over a lake and get the water to pass over a turbine and turn things for us. We need some kind of mechanical energy somewhere to move a magnet around a magnet to actually make electricity. It's not the people in a power station that make electricity. Electricity is a force of nature that generates when you move magnets amongst each other. That's how an electric guitar works. You move a magnetic string in front of a magnet, an electromagnet, and it generates charge. And that charge goes to an amplifier and you hear music. That's why it's an electric. It generates its own electricity out of thin air. Nobody knows why or how. It has 0 point energy. Now, where does it come from? You're not making the world better by doing the mitzvah. You're doing all the work of a power plant employee, and then God turns up, and that's what makes the world better. How much does he turn up? Depends on the degree of what that mitzvah is. 10 points, 20 points, 30 points, 40 points. Whatever, however big the mitzvah is how much God's presence turns up. Same with an Aveira. It's not you that's damaging the world technically. It's your lack of compliance with a particular thing which pushes godliness out, and that lack of godliness is what does the damage. But you're culpable because you didn't press the button at the right time, or you pressed the button when you shouldn't have. So too, you're rewardable if you did press the button at the right time, or you didn't press the button when you were told not to. He'll reward you for that. But really, it's his presence in and around the system which is under your control. He's become passive, saying, look, I'll generate a system. I'll go in or out the system based upon how you invite me or push me away. I'll let you do it. I'll give you free will. I'll leave it to you whether or not, within the system that I've set up, I will leave you to call the final shot as to whether or not you draw me into the system. If you do, it'll be very, very good for you and the system. And if you don't, it'll be bad for you and the system as a whole. It's on you. Do what you want. That's Bechira. That's Bechira. God does not withhold his good. And therefore, when a person draws close to God, he is continuously enlightened by him. It's only when an individual does not bring himself close to God that he's deprived of his light. And this deprivation, however, is due to the recipient, not God. If you do a good deed, it doesn't matter how bad you think you are. You could have just gone into a bank, mowed everybody down with a submachine gun, mass murder, got in a getaway car, got to the side of the M6, counted out your money, and you're like wanted internationally, huge bank raid, murder, everything. You still got to go to mincha. You've got to go to mincha. And when you do go to mincha, it isn't if God doesn't listen to you to tefillah. Of course he does. You make kiddush Friday night after doing all that. He turns up. Because they know this guy's a wicked guy. He robbed a bank. If you do a mitzvah, it works because it's a system. It's an electrical system he set up. Like a circuitry board that we talked about last time. Like the concept of a motherboard is that as long as a circuitry is working, that component on that end of that circuitry is going to work. It just is a system that he set up. Obviously, a guy that's robbed a bank and has done all these things is bad, and he's got to work on this and do tshuva and give the money back, and he's got to ask for forgiveness from all the people that he's hurt. Yeah, it's a tough one. Don't do it. Don't get yourself into that state. If you get one thing out of this, I was thinking of robbing a bank with a machine gun. Probably best not to. Yeah, it's best not to. Okay, so don't do that. But you get the idea. The idea is that it doesn't matter how bad what you've done is. The next mitzvah you do is functional because the concept of the mitzvah is self-sustaining. It isn't dependent upon whether or not you're a good person prior to hitting the mitzvah. Just do the mitzvah. It works. It's a system in the world. It's like a natural force. Just get it done. The highest wisdom decreed that every act of observing God's commands should bring a person closer to God to a particularly predetermined degree. Some more than others. He set that up. The individual then attains a degree of God's closeness corresponding to the degree of closeness that he has loaded that mitzvah with. And in turn, that causes a degree of perfection resulting from that enlightenment that you get by God closeness to become an integral part of you. The mitzvahs actually elevate your very being. You become more godly. Not a God, obviously, but you become more God conscious, more God refined, more God sensitive. The opposite is true of sin. Every sinful act removes an individual from God by a corresponding degree. And this results in bringing to him a certain degree of concealment away from God consciousness, causing his presence to be correspondingly hidden. Remember, you're the beacon in this case. People are the actions of God consciousness or God concealment. It's you that does the job. As a result of that concealment, a degree of deficiency becomes an integral part of that individual. If you do an Aveira, if you do a sin, on purpose with full, you do a proper thing, right? You knew what you were doing and you did it wrong. That will push Hashem out by the degree that he has said he'll be pushed out of the system by. And you have fixed in your mind and your consciousness a certain coarseness, insensitivity, and distance to God consciousness, which in Olam Haba is going to really set you back. Which is why we don't do it, which is why God said, well, don't do that. I only want the best for you. We're going to finish off next time by finishing this whole chapter, which is a very big chapter to finish, and giving you some homework. And then we're going to start the idea of the spiritual realm and talk about that from there. I look forward to seeing you next time, and thank you so much. And we'll see you soon. All the best.